Of course, you already looked at the title, and in some ways this is good, but in other ways, I don't know. Uber revenue jumps 72% on strong demand for rides. I'm on CNN Business right now. Uber on Tuesday reported $8.3 billion in revenue for the 3 months ending in September of 2022, a 72% increase from the prior year, fueled by strong demand for rides and meal deliveries, even as inflation and recession fears weigh on consumers. This is pretty crazy that the company's mobility segment, which includes its ride-hailing business, saw revenue grow 73% from the prior year to $3.8 billion for the quarter. The number of trips during the quarter grew 19% to 1.95 billion, representing an average of approximately 21 million trips per day. Per day. Uber's revenue from its Eats delivery business, meanwhile, increased 24% from the prior year to $2.8 billion. Uber's CEO stated, even as the macroeconomic environment remains uncertain, Uber's core business is stronger than ever. Now, on one end, good for Uber, right? I mean, if you think about it, Uber does supply a lot of jobs. Uber is far from perfect. We all know that. All the drivers know that. There's a lot of pros and a lot of cons when it comes to the ride-sharing industry. But I will say this, being very objective and looking at Uber, they have provided tons of jobs. They've allowed a lot of people to live more flexible lifestyles, being able to work whenever they want, being able to have instant cash outs, and a lot more. And I've said this before in other videos that the barrier to entry is also very small. That's a very underrated thing when it comes to ride sharing. As opposed to a lot of jobs that you need an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, a certification in something, some type of training, you really just have to have a driver's license and be able to drive. And for most people, they have a driver's license. Even if you don't have a car, you can rent one through Uber. So that is awesome. And like I said, Uber's far from perfect. You know, I just did a video about this, how Uber's now capped me on referrals, which I even met with the Uber Greenlight Hub. I talked about this in the other video. And they're like, honestly, we don't get it either. We're like, you're referring tons of people. Like even this year, I've referred over 100 drivers and I've gotten nothing. And why wouldn't Uber say, hey, Mark, we appreciate you signing up all these new people to drive for Uber. We're gonna give you even some, I don't know, Uber credit to go towards rides or something. I don't know. But anyway, I am rambling on. Like I said, though, there are a lot of pros and cons when it comes to Uber. The biggest one that I've mentioned, this is maybe my third or fourth time on this channel, is Uber versus Lyft. Now in this article, they didn't really talk as much about earnings as a Uber versus Lyft element. But that is the thing that's been on my mind more and more and more. I did a video talking about Uber 2023 and Lyft 2023. I have it listed below in the description. And in that video, I'm very, very worried about next year. I feel like it's always been a big debate, big battle of Uber versus Lyft. Almost as big as Red Sox versus Yankees. Let's be honest, right? It's the biggest thing. It's always Uber and Lyft. On all my videos, I say, hey, here's a great way to make more money with Uber and Lyft. They're always paired together. And what I'm worried about is as Uber's getting bigger and bigger, I've talked about this so many times. We have Uber Connect now where you can send packages. You have Uber Parking where you can reserve a spot in the parking garage. We have Uber Charter where you can get a party bus, which I gotta give to Uber. That's pretty cool. We have Uber Explore. They're exploring different ideas of, like, say, booking hotels and booking events, getting concert tickets, restaurants, etc. We have Uber Eats, of course, which, as I showed you, is crushing it when it comes to food delivery service. We have Uber Rentals, where you can now rent a car through Uber. Like, say, if I'm going to a new place and I want to rent a car for a day or two, I can do that. I also now have Uber Hourly, where I can essentially rent a Uber driver for a fixed fee every hour. So it might be something like $60 an hour, and they're basically my private chauffeur. Uber is rolling out all these features a lot, and I look at it very similar to the Amazon model, where Amazon started as, you know, an online bookstore where you could buy books and everything. And now Amazon sells everything, right? Amazon's not just a bookstore company, even though it started like that, it sells everything. Likewise, Uber started as a ride-sharing company, and now I'm looking at them as more of an on-demand service company. I don't look at them as much of a ride-sharing company anymore. If I want food, boom, Uber Eats. If I want, of course, to get a ride, boom, regular Uber. If I want to book a restaurant real quick, boom, Uber Explore. If me and my friends want to grab a party bus and have an insane time in LA or Vegas or Miami or whatever, boom, Uber Charter. So they're rolling out all these on-demand services, and it makes sense that Uber is growing significantly. However, and this is the big, just massive asterisk on this, as great as this is, because remember, the bigger Uber gets, it's more jobs for people, whether they're rideshare drivers, whether they're working directly for Uber, like say in an office, or whatever. But what I'm worried about is, what does this mean for Lyft? As much as the comparison has always happened, like I said, of Uber and Lyft, Uber versus Lyft, the biggest thing is, could 2023 be the actual year that there is just one? Could it be not just Uber and Lyft, but just Uber? There are a bunch of YouTube channels and sites online that have like Uber and Lyft in the title. This channel, for example, when I first started it, was the Uber Lyft Drive Book. Now it's for Share or Rideshare, as I've rebranded all my YouTube channels. In case you don't know, I have 6 different YouTube channels. And right now, at least at the exact time of this video, if you look at the artwork, it's black and pink. Uber and Lyft, of course. Could it just be that next year I have to remove all the pink artwork? I don't know. And that's what worries me. And I've said this before. If Uber does take over, where Lyft does not exist anymore, like say Uber buys them out, who knows what will happen, and Uber has a huge monopoly over the ride-sharing service, that is a massive market with limited, if not no other competitors besides Lyft. And I've already done a video about why it's so hard to create another ride-sharing company. That is going to be brutal. And I think the only way for any company to compete is if they already have a massive, massive global dominance. Which means if, let's say, Lyft goes away and Uber has a monopoly, they can pay drivers whatever they want, they can charge whatever they want, and we just have to deal with it. And this is both for riders and drivers. I've talked before, one of the best ways to make money as a driver, sign up with both apps. On some Friday nights, Uber pays more. Some Friday nights, Lyft pays more. Both have different bonuses, in addition for riders. Like, so if I'm going out and for whatever reason, Uber, the surges are obnoxious. I went out on Halloween in West Hollywood. I actually just completed Sober October, where I had no alcohol and no caffeine for a month. I'll post that video in the description. It's like a vlog video of my experience. And it was $40 to leave West Hollywood on Halloween night, and I was going 10 minutes. That same ride going to West Hollywood with those surges was $12. So it was a 4x increase. And let's say you're in that environment, you can be like, oh, well, Lyft is cheaper. I'll take a Lyft or Uber. Now you're stuck with one. And like I said, the only way to really compete with Uber, if Uber does take over and they have a huge control over the ride-sharing market, basically being the only one, the only way to compete with them is it has to be someone like Google, Amazon, Apple, etc., etc. And it's not impossible, of course, don't get me wrong. But the problem, like I've said in other videos when it comes to starting a ride-sharing company, is those transactions have to happen simultaneously. Someone has to want and request a ride at the same time that a driver is on the road, willing and ready to accept that ride. If they're off by even 10 seconds, a deal does not happen, a transaction does not happen, and that's a huge issue. And I think that's why a lot of ride-sharing companies have came about, like different new ones, and all of them have failed except Uber and Lyft. And I know this seems like a very weird kind of side segment where you're like, oh, you're just talking about Uber's revenue and now it's about Lyft and it being a monopoly and everything. But that is the biggest thing. As more and more numbers come out, and I've talked about this in so many other videos, as more and more numbers come out, I'm just concerned, could Uber take over? The answer right now is just looking potentially yes. And let's go even deeper down this rabbit hole. If Uber does take over, let's say in 2023, let's say that is the year that Uber finally takes over, what does that mean? What would they do? And what would ride sharing look like?